shots were in Amanda Chase's office. Amanda Chase, Republican senator from District 11. Amanda Chase getting 45,000 votes this past November. And each district has 250,000 people in each Senate district in Virginia. So Amanda Chase tossed out of committees by Tommy Norment, her now minority leader, who just lost another election with a number of bad moves. Norment shaking Amanda down for $10,000. She refused to pay it to the caucus. And so Norment stripped her of committee assignments, thus disenfranchising 250,000 people in her district. She's trying to still make a difference. But here's the key, right? So the caucus dues are $10,000. And if you don't pay them, you get kicked off of committees, therefore hurting your constituents, and she's still a Republican. But here's my constitutional question, Amanda. $10,000, okay, that's a number. What if it was 50,000, 100,000, 7 million? I mean, this is an arbitrary number that they pick. And basically, if they pick any number and you don't pay it, you can't get on committees. Which, what do you say to the 50,000 people, the nearly 50,000 people that voted for you, and you can't adequately represent them by having committee membership? What does Tommy Norment say to them?
Well, first of all, let me just say this was not, I don't think, a decision made exclusively by Tommy Norment. Now, he had the ability to move me on the floor of committee where I'm sitting next to former delegate, now Senator Pillion. And I like my seat in the corner, actually. I like sitting over there. And my mic still works, by the way, really well. I've actually used it almost every day since I've been in the Senate.
Yeah, but it's one thing to punish you by kicking you to the 40th seat in the Senate. Okay, that's inconvenient. You're in the corner. Not the best place to be. That's normally where they put freshmen that come in. I get it, right? You could deal with that. But not representing your constituents on committees that you are legitimately entitled to get is a disenfranchise to those voters because you didn't cough up $10,000 to Tommy Norment's caucus, who failed to hold the Senate. I wouldn't have paid him. I wouldn't have paid him either. But my question is, 10,000 is an arbitrary number. What if it's 100,000? What if it's 150,000? Does everybody just get kicked out of committees because they don't pay up?
So what
That's
happens?
Pay to play.
Well, I believe so too. And so one of my concerns was the rule change, which I brought up on the floor of the Senate before we voted on them, in which they included that you had to be a member of a caucus, the caucus of your party, in order to receive committee assignments. And of course, they gave me one committee, local governments committee, in the hopes that I couldn't say that. But basically what they did is they stripped me of 3 of the 4 committees that I was serving on because I rejected the leadership. And, I get along fine with Senator Norment, but on a principle, it was a business decision. He has supported legislation against Second Amendment. He's even sponsored some legislation regarding localities and restricting 2A rights in local governments, buildings, and even so much as put forward legislation this past year. And I just did not want to sit under leadership when I knew this would be the fight of our life, fighting for the Second Amendment, which is the foundation of all of our other freedoms. And I feel like it's important that we put leadership over us that we feel is completely with us, especially this year on the Second Amendment. It was a business decision, and I let the leadership know, the 4 members of leadership know that if Senator Norment was chosen again, that I could no longer sit under that leadership. And they chose to move forward with that leader and not address my concerns. So I just did what I said I was going to do. And if the leadership changes, I will go back to the caucus and caucus with the Republican senators. But, I'm a principled person, and I want the people to know that I'm strongly for the Second Amendment, that I will not vote for any legislation that would restrict a law-abiding citizen's ability to protect themselves. And, some of my colleagues, support some of those things. I will say to Senator Norment's credit, Leader Norment's credit. He did not support the bills yesterday that were put forward in the Senate Committee on Judiciary. We were talking earlier about the universal background checks, the red flag laws. All the Republicans on that committee voted against it. Senators McDougal, Senator Obenshain, Senator Norment. There were others on there. They voted against it. So I'm very thankful for that. And let's see, we had Obenshain, McDougal, Stewart, Chafin, and Norment who did vote. So the Republicans are doing their job right now in that courts committee. And even though we did not have the votes in the committee, so it's going to come before on the floor of the Senate later this week. So we will see that happen. But we have to continue to put pressure on Democrats and Republicans. Let them know that we don't want them to compromise on 2A. If you're going to do anything, follow Senator Bill to Steph and stiffen the penalties for the criminals. You know, that's who the legislation should be focused on, not law-abiding citizens.
So, Amanda, let me ask you this. Outline then for our audience exactly what passed out of the Judiciary Committee. And by the way, it used to be called Courts of Justice in the Senate. And the Northern Virginia contingent passed a rule to change the name to the Judiciary Committee so they can go to Washington, D.C., hobnob with the Congress people there at cocktail parties, rub elbows, and say they serve on the Virginia Judiciary Committee and like they're part of the Adam Schiff impeachment team or some ridiculous nonsense. That's actually why they changed the name that's been there forever, Courts and Justice, to Judiciary Committee for their own egos. What actually went down yesterday? There was a lot of 9-5 votes, and these were in rules. Yet today, I mean, I've come here in the General Assembly 100 times, 1,000 times. I never had to go through security checkpoints. Now I do, but it was not passed in the full Senate or the House. So what happened yesterday? What did they pass, and how did that take effect immediately out of a committee?
So there's two different issues that we're looking at. We're looking at what happened this past Friday on the Joint Rules Committee, in which this ban was put into place for members of the public, members of the General Assembly. That's separate than what happened yesterday on the Senate Committee on the Judiciary. What happened yesterday and why we saw the long lines, I mean, I saw people, I know many people have seen the visuals of people all the way from Bank Street, the door entrance there into the Pocahontas building, all the way back to the Court of Appeals.
Right.
Long lines. That had to do with Friday's non-transparent Joint Rules Committee, in which the General Assembly weapons policy went forward under the leadership of Speaker Eileen Fillercorn.
Right.
And, you know, instead of accepting responsibility for her policy decision, she tried to use Colonel Pike as her scapegoat.
Colonel Pike?
She did. She said, you know, what we're doing is a recommendation from Colonel Pike and law enforcement, which was a lie. That's not true, actually. Colonel Pike was told, this is what we're doing to move forward, and they gave recommendations. If that's your policy change, this is how we would implement that. So, you know, if you're going to put forward a terrible policy, you need to own it. Don't make someone else the scapegoat. So that's number one. But that's why you saw all the long lines. People, yesterday was NRA Day at the Capitol. We had a number of constituents who came here from all over Virginia to meet with legislators, and they had to wait, many of them, at least an hour just to get into the building. And I
just regular constituents.
Also
because
my
of the
staff.
Right.
My
Your
staff
had
did.
to wait.
And I have security with me, and they had to go through the same process the public did. And, you know, that's an efficiency problem, because if I, you know, my staff members, we're walking over to the building together, I have to wait for them to go through. It's not very efficient, and it was not a well thought out policy.
But should this have gone to the entire General Assembly?
Yes.
I mean, it basically they stack Rules Committee. Eileen passes it, and now we got a segment of, you got 40 people in the General Assembly. You got, 30 people or something on rules, and they're now making a decision for the entire chamber, for the entire government. How do you do that?
Well, you're exactly right. And that was the biggest complaint that I heard. We know that the other side is in control of the General Assembly right now. But the non-transparent way in which Leader Gilbert and those who were members, the Republican side of the Joint Rules Committee, they didn't find out until the day of that they were even on the committee. They didn't have the opportunity to review the weapons policy that put forward before they took a vote on it. So, if you're going to implement policy, and we get that, the other side is in control, but because you don't give other legislators the time to vet this policy that's going to affect, there was no public comment period. That is, to have no public comment period is beyond non-transparent. We work for the people, and I think the other side has forgotten who they work for. Mm-hmm. And it's important that they have a voice too. We're representatives of the people. And so we need to hear how they feel about this policy. There was no public comment period that went forward. So as a result, from that incident, from that meeting, that non-transparent meeting, we basically have a ban shoved down our throats, and we see the unintended consequences. Our policy staff, now we did hear that some of the, in the executive branch, their staff was somehow able to pass through without having to go through security. So we need to look into that.
Well, that's the way it always is. I want to get your chief of staff here involved, Lauren. Lauren, thanks for joining us today. Lauren, you were telling us a story. You get in here early. Thank you. You come in at 5:30 every day. You're one of the hardest working chief of staff in the Senate. And tell us the story about cutting your cheese. Can you share that, how stupid this whole thing has gotten?
Well, so I brought in some brie cheese this morning, and it's a little sticky and difficult to cut. So I brought a butter knife so I could cut my food. And it ended up being a little bit of an issue this morning, and the Capitol Police came upstairs and brought me some plastic silverware and asked if they could hold my butter knife downstairs till I left for the day.
So you couldn't cut your cheese? With
right.
a plastic spoon or whatever they gave you.
Because it's so sticky,
or
it would
spatula
break.
Or something.
Right,
yeah.
right, yep.
So now we've gone from, you're able to, for 400 years, you've been able to carry your weapon into the General Assembly, and in one day we've gone from that to they confiscate your cheese knife, your cheese butter knife. I mean, there you have what the Democrats have done in one day that never even got full debate or full transparency. They just pumped it out of rules yesterday. I mean, are they happy now that you can't cut your cheese? I mean, was that their goal? The next thing they're going to do is ban your plastic thing to cut a cake with on a birthday party. I mean, this whole thing is asinine.
Completely agree. 400
years changed in Rules Committee. I mean, you would have think this would have been an open debate. Now, let me ask you something, Amanda Chase, being that we are in your office here in the General Assembly. We're with Amanda Chase, State Senator, 11th District, Chesterfield area, in her office at the General Assembly, our Capitol Studios, Amanda Chase's office. Now, Amanda, you've been carrying your gun for safety. You have a concealed permit. You've been carrying it to the General Assembly for the 4 years that you've been here. Every day you do it for your own protection. You have the right to do that. Now, today and yesterday, what do? Leave it in the car?
So here's what I will say. I swore last Wednesday to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Virginia Constitution, so help me God. And that's what I'm going to follow, and that's what I have been following. I don't see Speaker Filler-Corn's policy is constitutional. And so there you go. So I'm following the U.S. Constitution and the Virginia Constitution.
So if Lauren, your chief of staff, can't get through security with a butter knife, and the law applies to everybody, how do you get through security with a weapon? How do you do that? How is that possible?
Well, in the policy,
And are you willing to get arrested?
I'm willing to get arrested. Absolutely. This is our Second Amendment freedom, which is, in fact, here's what I will tell you. We have to take a stand on the Second Amendment because every other freedom, right, that we have rest on the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is the foundation of our religious freedoms, our First Amendment. If they take our firearms away, then they can take everything else away from us. Mm-hmm. Our founding fathers enshrined the Second Amendment in our U.S. Constitution, not merely for the ability to hunt, but to protect ourselves from a tyrannous government that would be overreaching and to eventually overthrow it if it gets out of line. There are a lot of people that are looking at what's going on in the Virginia General Assembly and referring to our Democratic-controlled state government as tyrannical. And, we want to peacefully be able to carry and to exercise our Second Amendment right. And there are those of us in the General Assembly who, we're not exempt. I mean, we don't get special parking. I don't get, a special parking place whenever I come to the Capitol. And everyone knows that in Richmond, there's a high crime rate. So if you're driving to Richmond, you have to park your car and walk in blocks, sometimes miles. I know my legislative aide parks about 5 miles away from the Capitol and has to get a shuttle in.
You have to get a shuttle?
Or a mile away.
Yeah, it's 0.8 miles to get here in walking distance. And they do offer shuttle starting at 6 a.m., but when I get here, much earlier than that, then I have to call Capitol Police to come pick me up. But I'm worried about calling Capitol Police because they FOIA'd Senator Chase's records last year, and I don't want her to get in trouble because I want to ride to the Capitol for my safety because I can't carry now to protect myself, and I refuse to walk in the dark as a young female.
And you get here at, what time did you get here this morning, Lauren?
5:30.
Yeah.
And last night I left at 9:30. And I'm happy to walk if there's someone who's leaving at the same time. I will walk with them. I don't want to, have to make the Capitol Police take me. If there's another option, I utilize that option. But, it's about 0.8 a mile to get here in walking distance.
So you basically, the deal is that you, Lauren, have to walk here and you feel unsafe because you can't bring your firearm for your protection as you've done for the time that you've been here. You have to leave it in the car. So now you're unprotected because there is no shuttle and there's no way to get here.
Correct.
And so that's an infringement on your right, you feel, to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
The ironic part about this is the other side talks about how they are so for women. And they've been trying to shove this so-called equal rights amendment down our throats. And yet here's a wonderful opportunity for the other side to show that they're for women by allowing women and men and everyone, but I'm going to talk about women because that's what they, profess that they are so for. They have an opportunity to allow women to protect themselves each and every day. I have a number of friends who have been, who carry on a regular basis. I have a friend in Chesterfield County who was at a Wawa at a point when it was shot up. And that's a suburban neighborhood in good Chesterfield where everybody says, I feel safe. And so she had to crawl into the back of this Wawa while the shooting took place. They shot up her car, the windshield. She had to get a different car after that incident. And she said, I was in the back hunkered down hoping that the shooter didn't come back in the room where we were hiding out. And all I could do was pray. And I said, right. And I said, that's why we need to. And I'm trying to encourage everyone who, that's unfortunately the society that we're starting to live in. There's more violence and we have to protect ourselves. I've lived in Chesterfield since 1979. And I've never seen the crime that I have today. And we have to protect ourselves. It's a woman's right. It's a man's right. It's an American right.
You just want to be able to protect yourself. And what you're saying now is, I've only got 20 seconds. They're not going to take your gun away. They have no constitutional right. You deserve to protect yourself. So does Lauren, your chief of staff, and you are willing to get arrested and go to jail over it. That's the bottom line.
And I am also willing to equally sue. And I will, when we come back from the break, I will tell you what I'm going to do on the offense.